The medals on Captain Jason Anderson Miller's chest caught the morning light as he entered Liberty Diner. Each one, the Purple Heart and Bronze Star among them, told a silent story of courage under Afghan skies. At 32, Jason carried himself with the quiet confidence that 3 tours of duty instills in a man. His Marine dress blues, still crisp from the memorial service for his fallen friend James Parker, stood in stark contrast to the worn vinyl booths of this small Tennessee establishment. Jason settled into a corner seat, checking his watch. Ryan was running late, but that was typical for someone working logistics at Fort Campbell. He smiled, tracing the outline of their photo tucked in his wallet, spring wedding plans already taking shape in his mind. The Miller men had served America for 3 generations. Jason's grandfather at Normandy, his father in Vietnam, and now him. But Jason was the first to serve openly gay after the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. The transition hadn't been easy. Some comrades turned cold, others embraced him. But most important were those who simply shrugged and said, "You still shoot straight, Miller. That's all I care about." The waitress approached, smiling warmly as she set down his coffee. She recognized the uniform, the bearing, the sacrifice it represented. Through the window, Jason watched an elderly veteran enter, his Vietnam-era cap worn proudly despite its fading. Their eyes met briefly, a silent acknowledgement between those who had answered the same call in different eras. Jason's fingers absently traced the outline of the photograph in his wallet. Ryan's smile, captured during their weekend in Chicago, remained his anchor through deployments and firefights. The spring wedding they planned would be small, family, close friends, and the unit members who had become family when blood relations faltered. Sometimes courage isn't facing enemy fire, it's facing your own countrymen when they've decided your identity cancels your service. And as the bell above the diner door chimed, Jason Anderson Miller was about to discover that the fight for America's soul happens in places far from Washington or foreign soil. It happens in small diners where ordinary citizens decide what America truly stands for. If you're still watching, prepare to witness how one Marine's quiet dignity will challenge the very definition of patriotism. Follow Heart Stories for more moments that remind us what true American values look like when tested in the fire of prejudice. Sarah Wilson entered Liberty Diner with the confident stride of political royalty, daughter of Tennessee State Senator Robert Wilson. She wore her father's campaign pin prominently. Restoring traditional American values gleamed beneath the American flag emblem. She noticed Jason immediately, his uniform drawing her practiced political smile. "Mind if I join you?" Sarah slid into the booth without waiting for permission. "It's always an honor to meet one of America's heroes. My father's running for re-election on a strong military support platform." Jason nodded politely, explaining he was waiting for someone. Sarah leaned closer, her perfume mingling with the scent of diner coffee. "Anyone special, girlfriend?" "My boyfriend Ryan," Jason replied simply. "He's Army logistics at Fort Campbell." The change in Sarah's expression was instant. Her smile crystallized into something hard and cold. "Boyfriend," she repeated, voice rising enough that nearby diners turned. "I thought Marines were supposed to be real men." Jason maintained his composure, years of military discipline evident in his steady gaze. "I earned these medals serving alongside real men and women of every background. My orientation didn't matter when I pulled 4 fellow Marines from a burning vehicle under enemy fire." Sarah's face flushed as she pulled out her phone, camera aimed directly at Jason. "This is exactly what's wrong with our military today. Dad was right, repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell was the beginning of America's decline. Wait until my followers see this." "Ma'am, I'd appreciate if you didn't record me without permission," Jason said quietly. "I'm recording the decay of American values," Sarah countered, voice rising. "I'm standing up for the flag you're disgracing by claiming to represent it while flaunting your lifestyle." She emphasized the last word with unmistakable disgust. The diner had grown quiet now, other patrons watching the confrontation unfold. Some nodded in agreement with Sarah, others shifted uncomfortably. An older couple near the window whispered to each other, their eyes darting between Jason and Sarah. Our military used to stand for something, Sarah continued, her phone steady on Jason's face. Now it's just another victim of the woke agenda. My father's campaign is fighting to bring back real American values, the kind that built this country. Jason didn't raise his voice, didn't defend himself further. The same steady calm that had guided him through firefights now centered him in this unexpected ambush. His gaze shifted briefly to the flag pin on his uniform, the flag he had fought for, watched friends die for. Freedom meant different things to different Americans. He had seen enough combat to understand that some battles cannot be won through confrontation alone. Sometimes, dignity speaks louder than any argument ever could. Throughout the diner, the atmosphere had changed. What had been a quiet morning ritual had transformed into a cultural battleground, with Captain Jason Miller unwillingly at its center. The breakfast plates cooled. The coffee grew still in cups, as Tennessee citizens watched American values being tested in real time. Frank Reynolds set down his coffee cup with deliberate care. The 72-year-old Vietnam veteran's weathered hands bore the tremors of age, but his voice carried the steady authority of someone who had seen humanity at its worst and best. "Young lady," Frank addressed Sarah, rising slowly from his booth. "I didn't spend 2 years in Vietnam, so people could decide which Americans deserve respect based on who they love." Sarah turned, momentarily startled by the interruption. "With all due respect, sir, traditional values. Traditional values." Frank's laugh held no humor. "I watched men die for this country who never got to live honestly in it. Don't lecture me about tradition when you're disrespecting a decorated Marine." Frank moved closer, his Vietnam veteran cap catching the diner's fluorescent light. "You know what tradition really is? It's the promise we make to each other as Americans, that all of us get a fair shot at life, liberty, and happiness, not just the ones who fit some politician's idea of normal." From across the diner, David and Marie Thompson moved toward Jason's table. Their son was currently deployed overseas. "Our boy sends us letters about his unit," Marie said softly. "He says knowing his commanders judge him by his actions, not his private life, makes him a better soldier." David nodded, his hand steady on his wife's shoulder. "Our son serves with gay and straight soldiers alike. He says when bullets are flying, nobody cares who you go home to, only that you have each other's backs." Sarah's phone continued recording, her expression hardening with each interruption. "This isn't about respect. It's about maintaining standards in our military." Thomas and Richard Wilson, no relation to the senator, approached hand in hand. The elderly couple's matching wedding bands glinted under the diner lights. "We lived 40 years in the shadows," Thomas said, his voice gentle but firm. "Couldn't hold hands in public until our 70s. This young man shouldn't have to hide who he is to serve the country we all love." Richard nodded. "I served in the Navy during Korea. Had to lie every day about who I was. Spent my whole career looking over my shoulder, afraid of being discovered. Is that the tradition you want to return to?" "Young lady." Pastor Mark Johnson, seated near the window, had remained silent throughout the exchange. His Bible lay open beside his plate. The congregation expected him to uphold traditional values. Yet the scene unfolding challenged his understanding of Christ's teachings. Rising slowly, he cleared his throat. Micah 6:8 reminds us what the Lord requires to act justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. I see a humble servant of our nation being denied justice and mercy. That should trouble us all. Sarah's supporters, local campaign volunteers wearing her father's buttons, bristled at the pastor's words. One stood to quote Leviticus, another the Constitution, yet another the military code. The diner had transformed into a forum on American identity itself, whose freedom mattered, whose service counted, who belonged within the nation's embrace. Throughout it all, Jason remained seated, back straight, eyes forward. He had faced enemy fire with less dread than this public dissection of his worthiness as an American. Yet something powerful was happening in this small Tennessee diner. Americans were genuinely wrestling with what their country meant, not through slogans, but through the reality of a decorated Marine who had bled for their freedom. The bell above the diner door chimed again. Every head turned as Sergeant Michael Lawrence entered, the Medal of Honor ribbon immediately visible on his dress uniform. At 34, Michael carried himself with the unmistakable gravity of someone who had faced death and returned changed. The diner fell silent. Michael surveyed the scene, recognizing the tension immediately. His gaze settled on Jason, then moved to Sarah's phone still recording. Without hesitation, he approached their table. "Captain Miller," he said formally, extending his hand. "Sergeant Lawrence, 2nd Battalion, I see you attended James Parker's memorial this morning." Jason stood, the two Marines exchanging a solemn handshake. "You served with James, Afghanistan, 2021. He saved our entire unit." Michael turned to Sarah, who had lowered her phone slightly. "Ma'am, I respectfully request you stop recording. Military personnel have privacy rights, particularly Medal of Honor recipients." Sarah hesitated, recognition dawning. "You're that gay Marine who received the Medal of Honor from the President." "I'm a Marine who received the medal for pulling my team from a collapsed tunnel under enemy fire," Michael corrected calmly. "My orientation wasn't relevant when bullets were flying." Michael removed his cover, placing it carefully on the table. The gesture felt ceremonial somehow, as though the diner had transformed into a more solemn space. His fingers traced the edge of the Medal of Honor ribbon on his chest, America's highest military decoration, given for valor above and beyond the call of duty. "When I enlisted," Michael began, his voice carrying through the now silent diner, "my father refused to attend the ceremony. Said he wouldn't watch his son join an organization that would force him to hide who he was. He was right. Back then." Michael turned to address the diner, his voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had earned the right to be heard. "When I came out to my unit, I expected rejection. Instead, my staff sergeant said, 'Lawrence, the only thing I care about is whether you'll have my back when things go sideways.' 3 months later, he took a bullet meant for me." Sarah's expression wavered between indignation and uncertainty. "The military has traditions." "Yes, ma'am, it does." Michael interrupted. "Courage, honor, commitment. Those traditions aren't threatened by who we love." He nodded toward Jason. "Captain Miller's Bronze Star tells me he lived those values under fire." Michael pulled a photo from his wallet, a group of Marines, arms around each other, dusty and tired but smiling. "This is James Parker." He pointed to a young man in the center. "He was gay. He died shielding our unit from an IED. His last words were about his boyfriend back home." The diner remained silent, Sarah's phone now lowered completely. Michael continued, his voice softer but no less resolute. "America isn't great because we all agree or look alike or love the same way. It's great because, despite our differences, we recognize the humanity in each other. We fight for each other's freedom, even freedoms we might not choose for ourselves." In that moment, the abstract debate about military policy and traditional values transformed into something more profound. A recognition that behind every policy argument were real human beings who bled the same color for their country. "James Parker died so that Americans could continue disagreeing with each other freely," Michael said, a hint of emotion finally breaking through his disciplined exterior. "That includes you, ma'am. You have every right to your opinions about me, about Captain Miller, about what America should look like. But the uniform we wear guarantees that right for everyone equally." A murmur moved through the diner, not agreement necessarily, but something more valuable consideration. Even Sarah's supporters seemed caught in reflection, seeing not just a political issue, but the human beings before them who had risked everything for principles larger than themselves. The diner door opened again, revealing a distinguished figure whose face appeared on campaign billboards throughout Tennessee. Senator Robert Wilson stood framed in the doorway, his security detail hovering anxiously behind him. Sarah's expression brightened. "Dad, I was just explaining to these—" The senator raised his hand, silencing his daughter. His gaze moved from Sarah to Jason and Michael, then swept across the divided diner. Something in his eyes reflected not political calculation, but personal pain. "Captain Miller, Sergeant Lawrence," he acknowledged them formally. "I apologize for my daughter's behavior." Sarah stared in disbelief as her father moved toward the Marine's table. The senator's shoulders, normally squared for cameras, seemed to carry an invisible weight. "In 1986, my brother David was a lieutenant in the Army," Senator Wilson said, his voice steady but tight with emotion. "He took his own life rather than face discharge when rumors about his orientation began circulating in his unit." The diner remained absolutely silent as the senator continued. "I buried that story, buried my grief, and built a political career partly on policies that would have continued to exclude men like my brother from serving openly." He turned to Sarah, whose phone now hung limply at her side. "I've failed as a father if I've taught you to value political positioning over human dignity." Senator Wilson faced the diner crowd. "This morning, I'm withdrawing from the re-election campaign. There are more important things than political office, like finally honoring my brother's memory by standing for the right kind of values." The senator's hand trembled slightly as he placed it on Michael's shoulder. "My brother never got to wear his uniform with the pride you two display today. He never had the chance to serve openly and honestly. His medals, and he earned several, are in a box in my attic because I've been too ashamed to display them alongside the man he truly was." 6 months later, the Operation Honor All Foundation held its first formal gala, founded by Jason, Michael, and former Senator Wilson. The foundation provided support services to LGBTQ veterans across America, named after David Wilson and James Parker. It had already helped hundreds of service members transition to civilian life with dignity. Jason and Ryan's spring wedding featured an honor guard of Marines and Army personnel, with Michael serving as best man. Among the guests, seated quietly in the back, was Sarah Wilson. Her journey from confrontation to understanding, emblematic of a nation slowly learning to see beyond labels to the humanity beneath. At the reception, a memorial table displayed photographs of those who couldn't be there: James Parker, David Wilson, and countless others who had served in silence throughout America's history. Their sacrifices, once hidden, now publicly honored. When Michael rose to toast the couple, his words resonated beyond the celebration. "In America, we don't serve for any party or ideology. We serve for an idea that all people are created equal, all deserve freedom, and all have the right to pursue happiness." The foundation's work expanded rapidly, creating counseling programs, employment assistance, and advocacy initiatives for LGBTQ service members. Senator Wilson became its most passionate spokesperson, channeling his political skills into healing rather than division. The Liberty Diner incident, captured on Sarah's phone but never posted, became a teaching moment in the foundation's training materials, showing how confrontation could transform into conversation. Have you ever witnessed a moment when someone's perspective fundamentally changed through a personal connection? How might our nation heal its divisions if we sought to understand rather than condemn? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe to Heart Stories for more powerful reminders of what makes America truly great. The courage to grow beyond our prejudices and recognize our common humanity.